Hey there. Welcome to the Beer Garden. This is your landscape industry podcast that takes as long as it takes us to enjoy our favorite beverage. I'm Jason. That's Brandon. Let's get right into it today. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing real good. It's Friday,
Good.
and ready for a weekend. Going to a bachelor party tomorrow.
Nice.
So forward to that.
In Calgary?
Yeah. Our one of our managers, Riley, at work is getting married. So
Oh, nice. Tell Riley I said
Yeah.
congrats.
I will. We're doing one of those pedal pub things. We
Nice.
pedal around and do a pub crawl. So that should be fun.
We did that together in Calgary a couple of years ago, and the
That's
only
right.
thing I remember from it is that we worked our ass off. I say worked our ass off, like we lightly pedaled for an
On
hour
flat ground. Yeah.
on flat ground. And I remember when we finished, we parked in a parking lot away from where we started, and everyone gets off. They kick us off. I'm like, well, how's this little girl gonna get this pedal car back? And she just like hits the
She was
gas
a grown
pedal.
woman.
Yeah, well, dainty. She was smaller in frame. I'm digging
right.
a little deeper. Anyways, she just hits the gas pedal. The thing just has an engine and it just takes off and she cruises away. I'm like, why were we pedaling this whole time?
Yeah.
Just drive me around and let me drink beers.
Well, that would really defeat the purpose.
Yeah, I guess.
But I know what you're saying. Sorry to disappoint.
Yeah.
I'm doing that, and then might proceed afterwards to your regular bachelor party activities. We'll see where the night
Right.
goes.
All right.
Yep. What's the beer today? What do you have over there, Jason?
All right. I'm excited about this one. So today we're talking about the music industry, and I've chose a beer that fits that. So this beer is from True Brewing Company here in Denver, Colorado. True Brewing is awesome. They have awesome beers, but they're also like all about death metal. So all their beers have like death metal names. So this one is called Cursed. It's a mixed culture sour pale ale. It's got a little wrong camera. Camera 1, camera 2. It's got a little guitar pedal on it. So
Cool.
yeah, kind of perfect for this. They also, inside of this brewery in Denver, have one of the best hot chicken restaurants ever. And I've had hot chicken in Nashville because I know I'm going to hear from everyone about that. It's called Music City Hot Chicken, also appropriate for our topic today. So highly recommend True Brewing. What are you drinking?
Cool. I have Tragically Hip Lake Fever Lager from Big Rock. I introduced this on another episode too, but I had 4 of them, so I'm introducing it again. And I really like Tragically Hip. That's a band from Canada. If you don't know them, look them up. People compare them to Pearl Jam. They're better than that, I would say.
Shots fired.
Canadian version. This is by Big Rock. So Big Rock Brewing is a local one in Calgary. And pour one out for Gord Downey, who passed away. It was a national tragedy, I will say, in Canada.
Nice. All right, let's crack them. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Sorry, bud. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So today, this you should be able to do a drum roll. You're a drummer. But I'm about to announce something. I don't know if you guys have been Googling Jason or anything like that. Likely you have. Good looker like that. But this is not just Jason Hoke. This is the Jason Hoke of the epilogues. So the epilogues, I didn't know Jason when he was in the epilogues. And I didn't know that he was famous when I first met him either. But he's certainly the most famous person that I know personally. Epilogues was quite a big deal. You can see a poster on his wall back there, and he's quite humble about the whole thing. But he's a very kick-ass drummer from a very kick-ass band. And I highly recommend that you Google some pictures of him back then, because he was quite emo. And there's some real jewels out there, I'll tell you that. So anyway, I won't let Jason respond to that, those comments. we're going to talk about his experience today that he went through in the music industry, and some of the similarities that he can draw to the landscape industry, which sounds pretty crazy, but yeah, you're not going to hear that anywhere else. So anyway, well, why don't you just take us through a bit of your backstory and, tell us some of the funnies from being on the road too.
All right. Yeah, so if you listen to our first episode, you probably heard some of my backstory. I started, landscaping at the age of 15 at the company that I'm at now, but kind of at that same time, I was playing drums. I was a musician, and I joined a band around the age of 19, and that was the Epilogues. And yeah, we were very fortunate. We grew really rapidly, and not as rapidly as it may have seemed from the outside. That's the classic thing, right? The overnight success. It was most definitely not an overnight success. It was years of hard work and grinding. But yeah, we got to the point where we weren't just a local band anymore. We were touring all over North America. We did the major label dance where we flew back and forth from New York to LA for a whole year, being courted by labels, and eventually ended up signing to a label and had distribution through Sony. And yeah, just like a really great time in my life, but also a really challenging time in my life. So on one hand, we were, doing what we loved. We were playing with bands that we looked up to and listened to ourselves. We played with bands like Imagine Dragons, Awolnation, Portugal the Man, we many more. We played festivals all over the place. Played a festival with Motley Crue and Bush on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, which was nuts. And yeah, so on one hand, there's that side of it, which was amazing. And then there's the other side of it, which was like the music industry itself was going through a massive change. So most people know this story now as far as what the music industry went through, but just to kind of highlight kind of the state at that time, it was for decades, the music industry was built around album sales, right? So music sales, it was just selling the actual music. That's how the record labels made their money. And bands for the most part, to get to a certain level, needed a record label. Like they needed a record label to pay for the actual recording itself, because recording was crazy expensive and wasn't something you could just do in your house like you can now. And the record labels made a lot of money doing that. They were massive corporations. They would foot the bill for the recording, for all the marketing. That's what their expertise was. They would partner with these bands and put these albums out. And then things changed right at kind of the front end of when we were in the industry, and there was some technology that was introduced that really kind of flipped things on its head, and the music industry became that poster child for disruption. So initially it was platforms like Napster coming in, which was just a freshman in college, I believe, that developed this file sharing platform where you could essentially just share files, music, with anyone and everyone on the internet for free. And that really started to eat into the music sales and the record industry's business model. And that was closely followed by a whole bunch of other platforms that followed a similar model, right? Spotify, when Spotify first started out, you weren't subscribing to Spotify and renting it. It was very similar to Napster. Pandora, Apple Music, kind of all those things came along. And over a period of time, like, at its peak, the music sales were just the music sales alone, not concert tickets, not merch, not all those other things. Music sales were a $24 billion industry. And within a matter of time after these streaming platforms were introduced, it shrunk to an $8 billion industry. So a third of its size.
Wow.
Massive disruption. And yeah, so I paint that picture just because that kind of sets the tone for what we'll be talking about today. Like, I learned a lot of really valuable lessons during that time, and I want to kind of highlight those lessons. They've shaped who I am as an entrepreneur and my entrepreneurial philosophy. I talk about this all over the place. I'll do different like speaking engagements and talk about this because I truly believe there's a lot to learn from this, and it's not just unique to the music industry. These lessons can be very, very important for all of us in any industry, no matter what we're in. But the lens I see them through is the trades industry, right? That's what I know. And yeah, I'm excited to share those stories today.
So I haven't asked you this before, but I'm curious to know what the feeling was for you when Napster came out. I remember that, and all I remember is Metallica being really pissed about it, mostly. But
Yeah.
you as a musician, did you? At what point did you see this coming? Like, at what point did you see? Napster came out. It was like this little thing for a while. Lots of people still buying CDs and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. CD burners came out at some point in there too, and then people are duplicating them, and I got a CD burner and I sold a couple of Savage Garden CDs for like $5. Hopefully they're not around still to sue me or something. In like grade 8, or 9. Did you see this coming, or at what point was it really obvious? Like, where was your head at back then? Napster, and then whatever else happened, and then Spotify.
Um, I think looking back at it when that came out, like we were all consumers of music too, obviously, right? So we were using
So you were
these,
downloading it.
yeah, like we were doing the same thing. And I think it depends on where you were at. Like Metallica had already built a huge name for themselves. They were already ingrained in that kind of old guard business model, right? And
Yeah.
they did fight it, as many musicians did. Like a ton of musicians fought it, and they thought this is going to be the death of the music industry. For us, it was like, holy shit! Like, there's a way to get your music out there without a label. Like, this is a fast track. Like
And you guys are like 20,
yeah,
or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. So especially once it started to really get established, like Napster was pretty early on, right? But when it really started to get established, like there was Pandora, there was Apple, the early version of Apple Music, which before we like iTunes and those sorts of things, where you would still buy, right? You would buy a song. That like the labels were good with iTunes and that sort of stuff because you were still buying music. But the Spotify's and the Napsters of the world, they were very much not good with. And when Spotify started to like make a model of that and figure out how they could get around and not get crushed by the lawsuits and everything that were coming from the labels, it really became apparent at that point. Like that, I would say that's when it became really apparent, is when Spotify started to gain traction, and you could see that like, oh, there's like a business model here for them. Like they've figured out how to rent music instead of buying music, right? And that's recurring revenue, which like we both love. And that's not
Oh
what
yeah.
the music industry was before. Like there was no recurring revenue. The only recurring revenue is if you release more music, right? But they're not going to keep buying the same album over and over and over again. Whereas Spotify came up with this model where it's like, we'll just charge you a subscription every single month, and you can have access to all the music. And that was when it kind of clicked for me, and I think for us as a band was like, oh, okay, like this is legit, first of all. And there's an opportunity here to get your music out there on a scale that there hasn't been before. Like at the beginning, it wasn't clearly apparent that like you don't need labels anymore. Like there was still a lot of value to that, but it became more and more clear that like there is a model where you don't necessarily need a label anymore, especially as the recording technology got better. It's like, oh well,
Right.
now
Okay.
we can record in our house, and that's a game changer. So just a lot of things happening at once that really turned that industry upside down.
Very cool. So what are some of the similarities, I guess, that you're feeling now in the landscape industry, and where we spend every waking hour of our lives nowadays?
Yeah.
What are some of the comparisons
Well, I think like
or
one of
lessons, I
the
guess?
yeah, one of the big lessons that I learned was just, and this sounds so obvious and even a bit cliche now, but it's like you have to be willing to adapt in business. And that's actually something I see. That's a big one that I see in our industry, right? Like, again, going back to the music industry, this model had been the same model forever. And you had these labels, these massive corporations. That's what they were. They're huge. And there were six of them. They were called the Big Six. And that those were there were many others. There were like subsidiaries and independent labels and all those things. But like the industry, like any industry, has those top of the industry, and there were the Big Six, and they were really, really reluctant to figure out any way to adapt to this new reality. Instead, they were going to combat it, and that's where you started seeing Metallica. So a lot of people maybe don't remember this part of it, but like it was a whole thing where I think with the label, I don't remember all the ins and outs of it, but Metallica, like the big story was that they were like going to sue their listeners, the fans who downloaded their music. Like that was a whole thing. And
Right.
now I don't know how much of that was them and how much of that was the label and those sorts of things, but like people did, they went after people like teens that were downloading music and like went after them. And that was the general mentality of the big old guard industry, was just like, we're going to shut this down. We have way more money. We have way more attorneys. We're going to shut this down. It's a flash in the pan. This isn't even something that's going to last anyways. So we're just going to shut it down now. And that like kind of lack of forward thinking is something, not to speak ill about our industry, but like, let's face it, like for many years and even still, like our industry has been run by people who are quite a bit older, who have a very set way of doing
Careful,
things.
Jason.
Who have
Yeah.
a set
Oh,
set way of doing things. They like, why fix what's not broken sort of mentality. Um, and so when things come up that are potential opportunities, like streaming was, and those sorts of things, like the example is like right now, the big one that everyone defaults to is AI, right? Like that's a tool,
sure.
but just like technology in general, software in general, there's still guys that run their entire organization out of a notebook, right? Without any
Yeah.
sort of technology, and that's fine. But like, don't think that you're going to be able to run with the future with that model. Like, don't put your head in the sand. Don't be one of those crusty label execs that just put his head in the sand and refused to kind of see what was coming. Because what happened in that industry was, even though these are massive corporations, much bigger than any of our landscaping companies, they went from the big six to the big three. So three of them
Yeah.
went out of business. They were either absorbed or bought or went out of business or merged with the other ones, and they were taken over, right? So that's something to learn from, that willingness to adapt and just making sure that like you're paying attention to what's happening and what the consumer wants, because that was the big mistake they made, is they did not recognize what the consumer wanted, which was like the thing I always like to say is like, the consumer does not give a shit about your business model. I kept hearing that. I remember sitting around a table when we were doing the kind of record label thing, and that would be a question we'd ask, is like, what's the strategy for streaming? And like, we knew that this was not a deal we wanted if the answer was streaming's a flash in the pan. Like, it doesn't really work for our business model. Like, you're not going to make money off of that, so we're not going to pay attention to it. It's like, again, the consumer doesn't give a shit about your business model. They care about the product you
Right.
deliver, and they want the most convenient way of getting that product.
That's what I was going to say. I don't even think it comes down to price. Like a CD was 18 or $20 and whatever, but I still had to go to Best Buy and or whatever music store. I
Right.
can't even remember the name. There was Michelle and I were talking about that the other day. There's like this big chain of music stores. I can't even remember what it was called anymore, where we'd go shopping. Um, that's how quickly things come and go. But yeah, I think it really comes down to just convenience. It's like people will pay however much you pay for Spotify these days, 8, $15 a month, whatever. Um, it's not about it being cheaper. It's just about the convenience of it and the access
Right.
to
In
it.
fact,
So
sometimes it can be more expensive. Like in the long run,
Yeah.
paying for a subscription or multiple subscriptions every
I mean,
single month
we
is
get breakfast delivered from Tim Hortons. It's like $42,
right.
It,
Yeah.
it's like for a couple coffees and a not very good breakfast sandwich, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just more convenient. Tim Hortons is like 2 blocks, 2 blocks away. Now I look super lazy.
I was gonna say I've
That's
walked to Tim Hortons from your house.
okay. Well, sometimes, but yeah. What what are some of the things in landscaping? Like if we're talking about technologies that people should adapt
Yeah.
and consider adopting. Um, what are what are some of the most important ones you think? Like what things come to mind that you would just not run a business without? And I think for people listening, like keep in mind this is heavily dependent on business size too. Like if it's
Yeah.
you and your son or you and a friend, driving around in a truck all day, you don't need the, $300 a month time tracking software or whatever. But what's some of the most important things you run at ACA?
Yeah, well, I think that's twofold, right? Like there's things I'm watching and things that I currently run. So, like I still think it's pretty early, but all the AI tools I mentioned that before, robotics, like that's a big one that I think is coming down the pipeline. And I know those things are like overly talked about right now, but there's a reason for it. Like Spotify and Napster were overly talked about as well at the beginning,
Yeah.
and there
Like
were
don't write them off. You don't have to adopt them tomorrow, but don't
right,
just say electric mowers are stupid. Like we would never, you
right,
know, gas forever kind of thing. It's like at least be open to
exactly.
the idea and keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah. Digital mapping tools, those sorts of things, like any of the, like wherever you can implement technology to be able to repurpose your staff to higher level tasks. And notice I said repurpose, not replace. Like it's utilize those people for higher level tasks. So it used to be we would send someone out to a property to walk around with a measuring wheel and figure out, like, then get all those measurements, run that through our production rates, like, and do some equations to figure out how much we're going to charge. We don't have to step foot on a property now. We can pull all of that from a digital mapping platform, which by the way, like is run through AI. Like it's just a
Right.
recognition software identifying all these things. So those sorts of things. You mentioned electric tools, like that's a big one. And kind of on that same hand, more importantly, I think like the socioeconomic and legislative changes, like just the changing of like our environment in general. And I don't mean
Mhm.
like the environment, I mean like the environment we're in, like
Yeah.
that there's changes that are likely coming, and we can sit here and fight it over and over and over again. And I know that's what a lot of our industry does. And I'm not saying that these changes are all good or all bad. I'm just saying that like some of these changes are inevitable, and you can sit and fight it, but you're going to be the one that's behind when everyone else has already adapted. I would rather the industry spend time talking about like how we're going to adapt to these things and what sort of programs we can put in place to like help us make these changes over time if they're inevitably coming, than just battling each other the entire time. So that's my take on it. But another thing I'm seeing is like the entrance of private equity into our industry. Like
Oh,
that's
sure.
a big one to watch because suddenly our industry is like very appealing to private equity, and you're seeing a lot of people entering into our market. Um, the use of foreign labor, like that's another big one to pay attention to. Yeah, and just like I think in general we always like to think that these things are really far out, and I can tell you from experience, like they're not that far out. And it's like it takes time to transition, to think through how you're going to adapt, to think through how you're going to like make this new reality work for you. So you should start thinking about it, like at the very least.
Right. Yeah. Really good. Like the sounds of that. Um, yeah, I think one of the things in there, like just the tools for people to actually take away for us is just I see companies still not doing time tracking and adopting even solutions for scheduling and things like that. It's just a piece of paper handed out with a schedule, and And that's a very simple one. That's not AI. That's nothing like that. But you really want to know, labor is our biggest expense in the industry. So really tracking how it's being spent down to the minute is extremely important, so that you can get better at estimating, and then make more competitive bids, and cut out unbillable time, or like windshield time from your routes. And there's just a constant, it's talked about multiple times a day, in our company. Our crews just know it. They know their goals for every job. They know how they did on every job, time wise, their utilization every day. And yeah, we're crazy about it. And it's gotten fun. That's the thing
Yeah.
for those people that are thinking like my crews would hate that. Like, it just seems like some weird big brother thing. It's like, well, we just need to know where our money is going and our time is going, so we can get better. And once you dial that culture piece in, and it just kind of becomes the norm, now it's like a high performing team. And
Yeah.
it's just like feeds into itself. Like, crews
Yeah.
get competitive and have fun with it. And it becomes obvious that that's what it's about, is building a really good company. And I think that's the mindset that should be there from the beginning. So
Right.
that's the best one.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, that data collection is so critical. And you mentioned like the high performing team. You know this, but like, I'm a big F1 fan. I love F1, and I've
Yeah.
I've like built kind of the framework of our company. Like, we have an F1 theme at our company. Like, it's kind of the core of who we are, and that could be a whole other episode. But the point I want to make there is like, one of the things that I love about that sport is like, you just think it's like a bunch of, if you don't know anything about it, it's like a bunch of cars driving fast. It's like a driver in a car. Like, that's what it is. But it's not that. It's like this organization of people, huge organization that like have made knowing, like, first of all, being the absolute best at their specialty is their thing, right? Like, whether they're like a engineer, like, it's crazy when you look at their engineering team. It's like that dude's job is only to deal with like the front wing on the car. That's it. It's like he doesn't even know anything
Yeah.
about the rest of the car. He just knows about that front wing. That's how specialized they are. But also like the amount of data, the sheer data that they're collecting when they're out there driving. If you ever watch an F1 race and you see all the screens in the paddock and you're watching them, like, they're watching all this data to the where they know like how the car is behaving, how the driver is behaving. And that's like what I believe like we should strive for in our businesses. This, like, I love data in our business to the point where you can definitely be on like data overload after a while if you don't know how to analyze that data and use that data. But
Sure.
like, we collect a ton of data, and we could point to literally like, this crew is now running 12 minutes behind on their schedule. We have the next best crew is about, 3/4 of a mile away. Let's shift some stops onto their route. Like, that becomes very powerful after a while.
Yeah. No, your office, it's got so many screens and charts and numbers. It looks like you're launching somebody into space or something over there. There's so much going on.
More than we probably need, but it's like, I love that stuff.
Yeah. No, I know. Um, why don't we talk a little bit about how you guys do cross selling and managing? Like, we can get a bit into tech here, because I think just to draw a relation to the topic at hand here, like the disrupting the industry and so on. You guys are so far ahead on it. Some of the things that you do with how your customers sign up for service is insane to me. You handle a lot of single family residences, like thousands. It's
Yep.
crazy, and a lot of them are like one-off services. So going into fall, you're doing like how many aerations? Like
Yeah.
hundreds,
We're
thousands.
in the fall, we will, for one-off services in general, which is a mix of aeration, fertilization, sprinkler blowouts, and overseeding, those type of things. We'll do about this year. We'll do probably around 4,500 services in about a month and a half time span. 4,500
Right.
to 5,000, somewhere in there.
And these are not those are not recurring services. Those are one-off signups.
Yeah.
And so, like, some of the things Jason's done for this is just silly. Well, no, it is silly. Like he used to go out on those rental Lime bikes with irrigation flags, like those wire, flags, and had his staff just ride bikes, and he trained them to like whip them out of the bike without stopping into the lawns to advertise his services. And so this is like 4,500 jobs one time, like that's in 6 weeks or whatever it is crazy to me, doing what I do, which is only recurring contracts. I sell them and then they last for like 3 years. So please tell us how you manage that volume with, you don't have that many office staff, and get them on the schedule and all of that.
Yeah.
I think it'll blow people away.
So there's a few components to that, right? Like the first part is like just the very tip of the sphere. Like you talked about the marketing and how we get them in, but then it's like once they're coming in, it's like, how do you field that many requests? Like you're certainly not going to go out and bid every single one of those jobs, and you're not going to take every single one of those calls. It wouldn't be worth it with those services. It's a low dollar service. I could never afford.
They're like $60 kind of thing.
Yeah.
60, $70.
Well, the average job size on those is around $125.
Okay.
But yeah, they range from 75 to hundreds of dollars depending on the service. But that's not a big job size. There's no room for a salesperson to touch the job, because the second a salesperson touches that job, we just wasted a bunch of our margins, which aren't very big on a dollars. They're huge on like a percentage
Yeah.
basis, but we can't spend on sales team or customer acquisition cost, right? The only customer acquisition cost that we can pay for is the actual marketing itself to bring them in. So that's it. Like we know if we can get our marketing down to where it cost us $10, $15 a person to get them in, that's our entire customer acquisition cost. There's no sales cost in it. And the way that we do that is, first of all, we standardize our pricing. So we're talking about suburbia here. So these aren't big sprawling yards. These are all very cookie cutter yards in suburbia. And we just say, cool, that aeration, it's flat rate. That's a $90 service, right? It's a flat rate for all yards up to 5,000 square feet. So we do put a cap on it so that we don't screw ourselves. But we know that like our margin's going to be close to the same if it's a 2,000 square foot yard versus a 3,000 square foot yard versus a 4,000 square foot yard. So that is one way that we do it. But how we actually take that volume in is we just automate it. So kind of going back to the lessons I learned, one of them, as I touched on, was know your customer and focus on their needs. And we talked about convenience, like convenience wins. So they don't want to call you and talk to you for this. They just need their sprinklers winterized.
People don't even want to call to order a pizza anymore.
Right.
Like if you think like people will go on DoorDash, they don't want to call a place to order from Domino's or whatever anymore.
Right. And so many of us kid ourselves about that. Like, I'm not saying there's not a place for an in-person sales meeting and those sorts of things. That still makes sense for, some larger contracts and those sorts of things. But for getting my sprinklers winterized, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you on the phone. I certainly don't want you to come out to my house for this. Like, I want my sprinklers winterized and I want them winterized tomorrow. So what we built was very early on, this was in like probably 2001, 2002, we adopted an online scheduler. We were the first that I know of to do that in our industry. And basically it just, you go on, you enter your zip code in, and it only shows you availability for your zip code, because density is key with these things, right? That's the next component, is how you manage and produce all these. So we build the availability out by region and by zip code. And so we're only going to be in this zip code this day and only in this zip code this day. And then you go online, you enter your zip code, you only see availability for your area, you choose your services, and you just book it all yourself. So you go on, you book it, you put your credit card down, you make your payment, and you've reserved your service now. So
Right.
start to finish, the customer's done all the work to book that, and it's very easy. It took them a couple minutes to do it, and now they can rest easy knowing that's done. Then all of those things get spit into a system that we have that basically takes all those stops, and it's constantly optimizing the route, because like stops are getting added, like leading up to that day of service. They're getting added constantly. Our scheduler doesn't shut down until the day before, so like people can add appointments right up to it until we hit capacity for that day, and then that day won't be shown on the scheduler anymore. But while those are being added, they're being plugged into a system that optimizes the routes constantly and figures out the most efficient route. And then at the same time, that day before, when it finally shuts down, it says no one else can schedule, it finalizes those routes, and it sends out a notice to all the customers and says, cool, we know exactly when we're going to be there because we know the travel time, we know our average time on site. This system optimized all that. So it sends out an ETA, which is a 2-hour window. It says we'll be there between this time and this time, gives us a little bit of wiggle room. The day of the appointment, it reminds them of that again. It says we're going to be there between this time and this time. When the crew's on their way, like all the crew's doing is marking arrived and departed and entering their service documentation, photos and notes. And then each time they do that, it's triggering an automation to the next person saying, hey, we're on our way to your house. Here's like a map with the crew driving toward your house, just like any of those other platforms that you use for food delivery or anything else. So it, like, there's a lot of automation, I guess, is my point. And there's a lot of things that we've adopted. And in my opinion, like we wouldn't be able, at the scale we have, we wouldn't be able to even continue doing those services if we didn't have all that automation. It just wouldn't make sense.
Right. And what's cool here is there is a few, off the shelf softwares in there. Most of them are not like typical landscape industry softwares, and some of them are completely custom built. Like Jason's team at ACA and the Issue ID team built a lot of this stuff custom, like from scratch. They just put the code together. And I mean, when I listen to that stuff, it blows me away, and it makes me think like maybe I should do single family residential if Jason would hand me the software, but otherwise probably not. And so the thing I'm thinking here is, if you're a contractor today that's trying to do those things, and currently you're putting up like lawn signs and door hangers and things like that, which are great, to sell your one-off services for fall or spring, and you're answering the phone when people call, or your office staff is answering the phone, you better be charging a lot more money than Jason, because you're to hit the same margins. Like, you're never going to do it. And that's the point of this talk today, is really like, that is super disruptive to the landscape industry, because it's how the public wants to interact, obviously. The majority, there's the odd person that still doesn't know how to text and so on, and right. they'll want to call, and they want to talk about probably their grandson or whatever for a little while, which is cool. But all I'm saying is that Jason's just ahead of the curve. This is the way that the industry is going, or kind of is going, basically, and there's just no way that you could adapt to that in the old way of doing things. Just answering your phone, taking appointments, telling them you'll drive by their place and see how much it might cost, and give them a quote, and then ask them to mail you a check or whatever. Right. It would never work. So it's a really interesting comparison to the music industry, and just any industry that's been heavily just wrecked by technology, right, and software, basically completely replaced. So very cool.
Yeah. And you made a good point in there, which is like, what got me talking about that is the convenience factor. Some people do want to call still. It's getting more and more rare, but like call our office and someone will pick up in 2 rings. Like that's still an option. I'm not getting rid of that yet. That's still something that you can do. But even then, because we have all these tools that we're using, like you call in and my CSR on the phone can get you booked in for your service in a matter of minutes. Because again, people touching these services, we don't want them doing that for too long. So
Right.
they'll also, spend time talking to you about other things that your yard might benefit from. And that's kind of another piece of this, right? Like going back to the convenience thing, like if you book a one-off service with us, the second that we finish that one-off service, you're also going to get a bid for recurring service automatically because we've
Oh, isn't
pulled
that
your
nice?
yeah. Where it's a proactive bid, right? It's like you might not care, you might not want this, you might be happy mowing your lawn, but in case you do, here's the price for your yard specifically. You didn't have to ask us for it, and we convert a lot of people from that. Now, as a percentage, when we do that volume, it's not a huge percentage. It's like somewhere between 4 and 10%, depending on the year that will convert.
Out of
But
4,500 though.
yeah,
And that's in
exactly.
one season. Like your database must be enormous,
Yeah,
from
yeah.
doing all these one-offs.
It's tens of thousands of people. And so that's the key thing there is like that's tens of thousands of people now in our network that we can continue to work with in the future. Some other convenience things I just want to rattle off really quick, like speed to lead. Like I mentioned the tools that we're using and stuff like that, but
What is
80%
that?
of speed to lead is like how quickly you get the desired like action to that customer that reached out. So like if they reach out and they want, XYZ service, like how quickly do you get them the price for that service?
Gotcha.
80% of customers, this is like staggering, but 80% of customers go with the first bid, which is insane.
Right.
Um,
Well,
that's
and it makes sense. Like I always just try to think of it from the other side of the table, right? Like if I want to hire someone to get my lawn aerated, it's on my to-do list. I just want to cross the damn thing off. Yeah, I'm not the same as everyone, but I don't care if it's $60, $70, $80. I want to
right.
pick a company. I look up their Google reviews or something. I find Jason's I can book online. Cool. Done, done, done. Crossed off. On to the next thing. And I
Yeah.
think that's the majority of the public now. It
Yeah.
looks like you have good reviews. Super easy for me to book with you. I don't have, I can get on with my busy life.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's not just one-off services. Like our recurring services for residential are a similar model. Like they fill out a form online, they chat in our chat, they call, however they do it, their address gets entered, their square footage of their yard gets measured from an aerial view. It gets spit into our system, run through our production rates, and a quote goes out within 15 minutes from the time that they requested it. For recurring services for a package for the entire season, summer or winter. With commercial contracts even, or for us, that's mostly homeowners associations, but commercial or homeowners associations, we strive to get the bids out at the most within 48 hours. And the reason that it's at 48 hours is because we do those aerial takeoffs, but we might need some further verification. We might send someone on site to actually verify some measurements there or get a look at like the difficulty factors we should be using. But
Sure.
regardless, 2 days to get like a full bid for a $200,000, a year property,
Right.
like that is pretty
It's a
good,
lot
I think.
different than a
Yeah.
$60, $80 aeration. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So speed to lead is a big one. Yeah, and just like creating convenience for the customers any way that you can. Loom videos in your presentations. I know you do that really well in your proposal presentations. Again, like they maybe don't have the time to sit down with your salesperson and discuss it, but they can like get the walkthrough from that Loom video. You do one which I really like, which I want you to speak to a little bit. Like you added garbage enclosure cleaning to your like mowing service.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all HOAs, multifamily, and that's just I don't know how disruptive that is. Jason's are so much more techie,
It's convenient.
but
It's
it is
for sure
convenient.
for
Yeah.
the customer.
Yeah. Uh, Basically, it's just a common pain point, and you should always kind of know what annoyances and pain points your customers have. This is a very easy one that adds a lot of value. So if you live in an apartment building or a condo complex where there's like a garbage garage, every time you take your garbage out, you have this stinky room that's got litter all over the floor, and it's just not a very nice experience. And that's the experience for everybody on that property. Like everybody that lives there goes through that, once or twice a week. So we bring it up in the sales process and just say, hey, we include cleaning up the litter and all the garbage enclosures, and it's just included in our service, and we just sweep up and throw it in the bins, and it's no big deal. Very quick for us, takes an extra couple minutes for the crews, but really high value for the customer, and something they can all relate with. And yeah, that's pretty
Love
much
that.
it. It's simple. There's lots of simple things you could do too.
Totally. Yeah.
You don't have to hire a bunch of developers like Jason.
Right. Well, and like keep in mind, this has been like decades in the making that we've been building these processes out. It started with something very simple.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that, I would have expected like that's how you book services for, like, if you're going to like a spa or something like that, right? Like you like pick a day and so on and so forth.
That's the first scheduler. Sorry to cut you off. The first scheduler we ever used was built for spa services. We just
really?
took it and adopted it to the landscape industry.
Nice. If there's a landscape software company watching this episode, maybe we should build it, Jason. It's just like, why don't they do it? I don't understand. Like, why did none of them? They'll have little parts of that process, but I know there's at least 3, if not 4, like off the shelf softwares that you have, chained together. And most of these things do not just have native integrations or Zapier connections, if anybody knows what that stuff is. This is like some hardcore nerdy Einstein shit it's like Einstein's chalkboard kind of stuff going on at this landscaping company. And I don't understand why nobody has as dialed of a system. I've met hundreds of landscape business owners, and none of them have this.
I think, to be honest with you, one of the reasons for that is that it's just too much work. It's the people often look past those one-off services, and it's just easier to not do them and just only sell recurring or move on to like commercial or something like that. But that means that there's a big hole in the market, right? Where it's like, if everyone's just going to look past that, and the only guys doing this are going to be chucking the trucks who can do it for $20 and are happy doing 5 yards a day, then it's, an opportunity for others who do come up with a solution for that. So I think that's part of it. And I think, until someone develops, which, hopefully is us, a solution like that's out of the box that you can just
that's
like
project
use.
2, issue ID, and then we'll start working on that.
It's in the
probably
works
soon.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason, but I don't know. I also you have to be passionate about it, and I'm passionate about that stuff. Like I saw the relation to the music industry, and I think that's what made it click for me, as I'm like, oh, this is something I can get behind. Like, we've talked about this before, but like, I'm not super passionate about cutting grass. I'm just going to be honest with you. But like, I'm pretty passionate about this sort of stuff. Like, I love, one of our guests, Benji, said it like quoted,
Sir Elon.
Elon, thank you.
Musk,
yeah, he quoted Mr. Musk with like, I'm not like, building a car is easy. It's building the factory that builds the cars that's challenging. And like, that's the stuff I like nerding out on.
Yeah, totally. You have more in common with Elon Musk than Elon Musk sleeps on the couch in the factory to get things done. Jason sleeps on the couch in the landscape company to get shit done sometimes too.
Are you ready for another beer?
Yep.
All right.
Almost.
Let me finish this one up.
God, I regret buying these tall ones.
I know. It's the same thing I was just thinking.
Good thing it's Friday.
Yep. And you've got a bachelor's party to go to.
That's tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Michelle asked if I wanted to build a puzzle tonight. So I might
nice.
get wild with these beers and go build a puzzle, back to the basics.
We didn't build our Lego car when you were here. I'm kind of disappointed about that.
Yeah, I know. That was disappointing to me too.
It's hard to find the time. Do you have the same beer?
No, I'm switching to cider. This one is the Outsider Cider. Very good name. Canmore Brewing. Mentioned it in another episode. Canmore is, it's crafted at 1,309 meters. Do you know how high that is, Jason?
Not a clue.
Let me convert that for you as I'm talking. But Canmore is near Banff or Lake Louise, if people have heard of either of those destinations. Yeah, very nice. That is 4,300 feet.
There we go. In English.
It's
excellent.
Whatever. It's it's a very nice mountain town. It's 45 minutes or so drive west of Calgary. Beautiful.
How many
place.
feet was that? I'm sorry. 4,500?
4,300.
That's cute. It's real cute.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, Denver. Yeah, tell me about it.
It's a mile. 5,280 feet. Mile high.
Right. A mile is 5,283.
Because it just makes sense, right? It's like it's like how freezing here is 32 degrees. It makes perfect sense.
Well, let's not argue. What do you got?
I am drinking also from True Brewing, the Chapel of Ghouls.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
I really like this spot. They do it right. This is a hazy IPA.
Gross.
Yeah. I think it's great. But, predictable reaction from you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'd love to share the next kind of lesson that I learned.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We talked about this a little bit at the top, and you've probably heard Brandon and I both talk about it ad nauseum in our other episodes, but this was another lesson I learned from the music industry. Recurring revenue wins. And we talked about this, like it used to be you go buy one album and then you're done. Now you pay for a subscription over and over and over again until you die, basically, to get music. Great. So, and those businesses that have recurring revenue, whether you're in the music industry or the landscape industry or a trades business or whatever it may be, marketing, recurring revenue, it's just a matter of fact, gets higher multipliers when they're valued. If you have recurring revenue, your business is worth more. There's no way around that. And the reason for that is, like, think about it. Like, if I sell $1 million in landscape maintenance services, recurring revenue, and I have a 90% retention rate year after year, so I retain 90% of my revenue each year, then the next year, if I want to maintain my size as $1 million business, I only have to sell $100,000 because I have $900,000 coming back to me year after year. And so I'll sell $100,000, I'm still $1 million business. If I sell another $1 million, then I'm a $1.9 million business. So, like, it's easier to scale. It's kind of a sell at once and then just focus on retention model. So it just gets valued higher. And that was something I noticed when these other platforms came in. And I was just like, man, that's really pretty sweet. It makes sense now. And like, it makes total sense. But at the time it was like, oh, rent music. That's crazy. Right. So yeah, I think, just some numbers on that. Typically, business valuations for businesses that have recurring revenue are typically 8 times higher than businesses with little or no recurring revenue. I wish I had the source for that fact, but you're just going to have to trust me on it. I pulled it from somewhere
on the internet. I believe it.
Yep.
You know what I heard? I heard recently, basically, you hear a lot about this these days because like private equity is coming in and consolidating a bunch of businesses and buying them up and stuff. But there's, construction and like one-off businesses are becoming a little more attractive after all the scares we've had with I guess inflation and increases in material prices and increases in equipment prices and those types of things, because you can change your pricing very, very quickly
Hmm.
with construction or one-off jobs. Like you can easily, go into next fall, and instead of $65 for that aeration, you can say, well, now it's $85, right? You can
Right.
change it on the fly. Whereas if you sold, a 3-year contract, it's a little tougher to tweak. And so they're, just because of that, in the recent, few years, they're getting looked at more closely. I don't really
Hmm.
know that from experience, just what I've heard, but it makes sense.
It does.
And yeah, I think what's smart there, like a little bit off topic, but I think what's smart there, and what what you need to do if you are in a recurring revenue business with subscription model is, make sure you're building in options to adjust your pricing or adjust for inflation or these types of things.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a valid point, and I think you're right. It highlights. I don't think that discounts recurring revenue. It highlights something you need to think about with
right.
recurring revenue. And yeah, you got to put those safety measures in place to be able to adjust. It's certainly easier with a one-off job to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Um, Another lesson I learned. So this is a big one, and we've built an entire software platform around it together. But this is increased revenue per customer. And what I mean by that is, to go back to the music industry, right? Like we were very fortunate. And I want to be clear, like I'm painting this like we saw the whole thing coming and we took all the right steps and we came out on top
Well,
like that.
you're talking in hindsight. That's
Yeah,
why I was curious earlier. I'm like, at what point did you see, like, oh
right.
shit, we are not going to be relying on CDs anymore,
Yeah. And
or records,
and
or however old you are. Yeah.
to paint like a more realistic picture, we had like any business or organization, we had a shit ton of missteps and
Mhm.
we had to grind really hard. I know you've heard this story, but like it wasn't just like tour buses and sold out venues. The reality for a very long time was we were traveling in a 15 passenger
Groupies.
van.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, tons.
15
No,
passenger van. There was only 4 people in the band, but the
well,
other 11 spots were also taken up.
no, we were traveling in a 15 passenger van. Oftentimes we would have 6, 7, or 8 people traveling in that van with like together, because it was staff. It was not as glamorous
Oh,
as you
I
want it to
see.
be. It was crew who was helping us load in and out, our manager, people who were helping us run the merch booth. When we were lucky enough to get that, for a long time
Mhm.
that was just us. But like that's not super roomy when you're basically living out of that van, which was the case for a long time. There was a grind. Like we slept in and lived in the van for a long time because we couldn't get hotel rooms. We couldn't afford hotel rooms. We played shitty venues to next to no one for a very long time until we could build a name for ourselves to get to the bigger venues. There's many times where we sat in broom closets waiting to go on, reevaluating our entire life, like and what our decisions that we made. Um, and you know, I think nothing highlights that better than the imaginary sandwich, which is something that we we had to
I know
resort
this
to
story. This
when
is
we
sick.
were broke, which is, a
This is
good
the
meal.
poorest story I've ever heard.
A good meal at times was taking one piece of bread, not two, because you can't be selfish. There's a bunch of us that gotta eat one piece of bread, folding it in half, and just pretending that something's inside of it. So like you could have a nice like Italian sub, you could have you could have a meatball
Can you
sandwich.
just explain it to your friends so you
Yeah,
can all get
exactly.
in on it?
Yeah, exactly. Um,
No.
it's like Hook. You've seen that movie, Imaginary Food. You just
No, I don't know.
oh,
I don't think so.
oh man. All right. Well, that one landed on deaf ears, but we that's like the level that we had to live at for a very long time before we got to the next step. So I just wanted to point that out. It wasn't always like we were crushing it. And there's many bands that went well beyond wherever we went, like well beyond. But I
They
feel like
were imagining dragons instead of sandwiches.
exactly. That was our Shelbyville. Imagine Dragons was a band that we toured with a lot early on. We played shows with a lot early on. And we had a nice upward momentum and they had like this upward momentum. So, but yeah, the last lesson I learned, increase revenue per customer. What I mean by that is we went from just focusing on kind of one primary revenue stream, which was music sales. Um, and, at first it was like, okay, so we're not really selling many CDs anymore, but we're selling a ton on iTunes. Like we're getting it's individual tracks now, but we're still getting that. Then it was like, okay, now we're not really selling those anymore because it's Spotify and like we're making, you have your I have my own thoughts about Spotify and their model and those sorts of things, but like it got us a lot of exposure to a lot of people, and that's the key thing there, right? We weren't making a ton of money off of it, off of any of those streaming services. So we had to start focusing on other things. But what we had was an opportunity. Used to be really hard to get our music in front of people. Now it's really easy. So just use that as the lead in and then sell things like concert tickets. Get out there, do the grind, hit the road, get out there and sell the concert tickets. When they come into the show, make sure that you're back at the merch booths because people want to come talk to you after the show. You have to put in the work, give them the FaceTime at the merch booth and sell them some merch. And now you've sold them some merch. That's another revenue stream. The more and more people that you do that with, the more credibility that your business, your band is now going to have, the more likely you are to be able to negotiate placements on things like commercials and movies and video games and those sorts of things. And that's another big revenue stream, right? That's licensing. So now you can start to get your music out there in those sorts of ways. So now you really got to start thinking full picture about all these different revenue streams. And it's key that is that another siren?
Every episode.
Every episode.
Well, there's a cop shop just pretty near my house. So.
It's like
it's not a good area. I thought we bought a house in a good area, but yeah, there's a lot of night walkers and stuff around here.
It's so not what I thought Canada was.
Well, they're still polite. They'll sleep on your lawn, but they say sorry.
That's actually pretty good.
Very nice. Yeah. Good people up here.
I'll vouch for that. So where was I? Cross-selling. We had to think about all these different revenue streams. And the reason I know that is like valid advice, it's not just coming from me. It's like, look at what the record labels did. Record labels used to just make their money off of album sales. Then there was the birth of the 360 deal. That's not for this podcast, like my thoughts on that. That's like a whole thing. But basically what they did is they said, you know what? Like we're not making money off of music sales anymore. We're finally going to change our business model. Too little, too late. But what we're going to do
record labels you're talking about.
Yes, record labels. What'd I say?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just trying to keep up.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I got it now.
But they basically said, we're going to take a cut of everything. We're going to partner. We're going to start an entity together and we're going to partner for the distribution of this album. And we're going to take a cut of the album sales, if there are any, but also the ticket sales, the merch that you sell, any penny that comes in the door, we're going to get a cut of now. And
how did they know the merch sales? Like, how did they keep track of that?
They'll send some.
Jason's standing at the thing. There's a suit standing at your merch booth.
Well, that is actually common. Like they'll have an in-house manager that travels with you, but they don't even have to do that. They're the ones paying for the merch, right? So they're going to pay for the merch for you to take out on tour. And it's like, cool, we paid $5,000 for that merch. You're going to give us right now $2,500. You keep the rest once you sell it.
Yeah.
So,
oh, really? Very nice.
So like that's the model, right? And it's just thinking about those multiple revenue streams. And that's something that I believe very firmly in. Like we talked about the one-off services that we provide. those are not a loss leader. I want to be very clear about that. I don't really believe in loss leaders. Like, I don't believe in doing work where you're losing money on it. They make very good margins, but we have to do a lot of them to generate revenue, right? A lot of revenue. But what they do is they get our foot in the door with these customers. I mentioned already that we automatically send a bid for recurring services and we convert X% of those. So we're cross-selling. We're going from a one-off service to getting people into recurring revenue. Once we have the recurring revenue, we get our account managers on site doing quality inspections. And while they're doing quality inspections, they're identifying other opportunities. There's a dead plant over there. There's a dead tree. This lawn could really use some top dressing, whatever those things are that go beyond the standard maintenance contract. And we build a property improvement plan for the customer. Again, we're not like shoving this stuff down the customer's throat. We're positioning ourselves as the landscape partner, and we're making them aware of these other things that they can do, these other revenue streams that we have when we look at it from our side. And they feed each other. And we do both, as you mentioned, single family residential and homeowners associations. So even those different client types feed each other. If we land a homeowners association, single family homeowners association, one of the first things that we do is we give them a document, a like one pager that's branded with their property's name and all that sort of stuff. We give it to the board and say, cool, pass this on to all your residents. They all get a 5% discount if they sign up for services with us.
Cool.
And so the board looks really
Built-in
good.
density.
Yeah, the board looks really good because they can pass that on to their residents because they chose to partner with us. And then the residents sign up for those services, and our crew gets to just park for a day doing the common areas and then moving on to all the single family homes within that community. So finding those connection points is pretty fun. Like, how can I connect? We do this and we do this. How can I connect the two? How can I make it so that each revenue stream feeds the other one? And I'm a big believer in that. It worked for us in the music industry. It works for us in our landscape company.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, to sum it up, it's what I hear is just don't always focus on new sales. Spend actually a lot of time thinking of what you could sell to your existing customer base that already trusts you and already knows you, and it should be much easier to sell to them, even if you have a maintenance contract with them. There's all kinds of stuff you can sell. You can sell them a couple of one-off like bolt-on services that you might not have within your regular weekly maintenance. You could sell them garden gnomes or bird baths or whatever the hell, all kinds of different things. So
right. And it's not only easier, it's cheaper. It's very expensive to generate new leads, like very expensive.
Yeah.
And
totally.
there's
like you already have them in your database. Like, I don't know.
Right.
How, you have tens of that. How many garden gnomes do you think you could sell this fall if you ramped up garden gnome?
I think
you got tens of thousands. You bet you could sell 5,000 garden gnomes this fall.
I bet we could crush in the garden gnome business. Yeah, and we'll do a whole other episode on this, but like I always talk about the business growth pyramid. And it's like there's 3 layers of it. I feel like everyone jumps to that top layer, which is like new customer acquisition, which is crazy expensive. And frankly, like if you haven't figured out the bottom 2 layers, you shouldn't be jumping to that. The bottom one being retention. Like, first of all, retain the customers that you have. That's like
smart.
The best thing. The first step to growth is make sure you're retaining the ones that you sell, because otherwise you're not going to grow at all. You're just going to be pouring water in a leaky bucket. And then the next step is revenue per customer. That's the next one. So increase revenue per customer. That's what we're talking about here. So like retain your customers, sell your customers more, and then go get new customers. Focus on getting new customers.
That
but
makes sense.
It's cheaper. It's easier. it's the pyramid
Jason
scheme.
runs a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah. It took me a long time to think of it that way. And early on, obviously you got to go get the customers if you have none. But yeah, very quickly you got to start thinking about that base of the pyramid and building that up. In my opinion, it took me a long time to figure that out. I used to just dump money and time into getting new customers.
Yeah. Awesome. Really good. I even got some good ideas there.
Oh yeah.
We got to sell, like, well, just we work for condo boards and do recurring contracts, and there's certainly we sell a lot of enhancements and do a lot of long-term, property improvement planning with the boards, primarily on the common areas, at the HOAs and condos that we do. But that's how our business is built. Like, I really like working for those types of customers. But there's got to be something, whether it's garden gnomes or something else, that we could market to all the residents too. There's tens of thousands of residents and other owners in these places, and you do that really, really well. Like, you get a homeowners association that's got hundreds of homes in it, and then you also work for all the individual homes. So you mow the boulevards and stuff, all the common areas, and plow the streets or whatever, and then leverage that into all the single family homes, which is really smart too. So
yeah, that's a good point. Like, you have that. You have that's a really valid point. Like, you have maybe, I don't know, 75, 100 core customers in the form of boards.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a valid point. Like, each one of those customers has another, I don't know, hundreds of other potential customers that live there. Yeah, that's really cool. We should play around with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's not the first time it's crossed my mind, but
right.
I think that's kind of, the moral of what we're talking about is, like, think about these things, because it's probably easier for me, if I can think of the solution to it, to ramp that up rather than get the same amount of sales from new condo contracts. So
right.
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. Well, yeah, those were my big key takeaways. I could go on and on because I love talking about this stuff, but we should probably wrap it up. So to recap, like, my big takeaways were: be willing to adapt, know your customers and focus on their needs, recurring revenue wins, and increase revenue per customer. Like I said, I love talking about this stuff. If I ever run into you anywhere, any of you listeners, and you want to chat about this stuff, this is like my bread and butter. I love chatting about this stuff. So drop a comment in the episode. Make sure you subscribe, like, tell your friend about it. And appreciate you guys listening. Anything to add from you, Brandon?
Yeah, I'd like to see you cut in Jason drum solo from the epilogues.
Okay.
I just want people to see the cool, haircut. Yeah.
We call that an eme over.
An eme over. Okay, yeah, good.
Yeah, I've now graduated to just the straight comb over because I'm old and losing my hair. But the eme over was where it was at.
Yes. Okay, very good. All right, man. We'll chat with you later.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Okay.
Cheers.